Hey Charles, so part three. So I was in the office, the doctor came in and he took one look at me, he put me in a wheelchair, and they actually wheeled me right to the emergency room from the OB clinic. And thank God it was a connected hospital. When I was there, they put me on fluids. They said I was really dehydrated and
Malnourished
and
too.
malnourished. And that was the first time that they used the words, we suspect that you have something called hyperemesis gravidarum, which the only thing I had ever heard use that term was E! News when they were talking about Kate Middleton, because I had heard that Kate Middleton had this severe morning sickness, is what a lot of people refer to it as. And
It's not a very easy word to say, I guess.
no, and it's so understating the gravity of what it is. Basically, it's an allergic reaction to the pregnancy hormone in your body, and until that hormone is out of your system, you will continue to react and to be sick, and it can lead people to having kidney failure. It can lead to death of the mother. It can lead to death of the baby. So I got my fluids. Basically, there's nothing that they can do. No medications work for it. It's something you just have to get through, basically.
It's barely even been studied.
Yeah, there is very little help. Um, there was one website called helpher.org that was my saving grace. They actually sent me books on it, and
It's like a giant forum for people
yeah,
suffering from HG.
and yet like Western medicine doesn't really talk about it. I actually saw an acupuncturist because it was the only time I would ever get any sort of relief. Western medicine totally failed me in that regard, and it was terrifying. It was so terrifying to be that sick and for no one to really know what to do or how to address it or to even kind of take you seriously. I remember them saying, eat crackers, eat ginger, and
That'll help.
nothing worked, and it was just insulting, honestly, to hear it. I've had morning sickness, I've been pregnant before, and nobody takes you seriously. So basically all I could do was go to the emergency room and get fluids. By the time we were 8 weeks along, I had gone 3 times to the emergency room. They were actually running out of veins in my left arm, and I still have scarring in it, because they had to reuse the same veins so much to give me fluids.
Or to draw blood for tests.
Yeah. And
And,
one,
well, I guess something we haven't told is like in the middle of all this, like starting from week 4, going through week 8, we had been seeing like our normal OB to get ultrasounds. To, like, how's the how's the fetus going? Like, is it surviving? And I don't know. I kind of don't remember all the details, but it seemed like every time we'd go there, it wasn't good information.
yeah,
Like the heart rate, the first one, the heart rate was too low. Like way, like it was on the cusp of being like not viable, but it was just slightly above it. So they're like, okay, it's low, but we'll see. So we'd go in every week, and every week it was lower and lower and lower. And I don't know. Like it's Minnesota, it's the Midwest. Nobody likes to talk about what your options are when a baby isn't growing. So it seemed like they kept just trying to hope that it would turn around, like even beyond when they should have. And by week 8, like it was dead basically.
it had stopped growing at week 6, and we just kept hope. And then by week 8, it had such a diminished heart rate that they said it's an inevitable miscarriage, and you're going to start miscarrying soon. And then that night, the bleeding started. Um, one one in 3 babies don't survive a mom having hyperemesis gravidarum, and our baby was one of the 3.
Hmm.
And so I was rushed in for a DNC, which is a surgery to remove the tissue surgically after you miscarry. They actually left some tissue behind by mistake, and I started hemorrhaging, and I actually needed a second surgery
Hmm.
to remove everything.
2 surgeries, 2 like anesthesias, all in 1 week.
Yeah, 5 days apart.
Hmm.
So needless to say, I physically was pretty destroyed by that point, and emotionally and mentally too. So now we're not pregnant anymore. We've lost our baby. I'm still sick because it takes 6 weeks for that pregnancy hormone to be out of your system. And I start having emotional and mental health issues. I start having panic attacks, horrible anxiety. I'm having depression, postpartum depression. I'm having 6 weeks of almost entire insomnia.
Nightmares almost every night, I remember.
Nightmares, not being able to, like, just shaking and not being able to, like, get warm. And so I actually started to see a infertility counselor, psychiatrist, and she said hyperemesis gravidarum is traumatic. It's not just sad and maybe you miscarry. I mean, it's truly trauma. And I was actually diagnosed with PTSD from the entire experience. And I had never had any sort of mental health issues prior to this. So it's earth-shattering when you realize that you can't have another baby, because that is why I was spiraling in those months after the DNC. The realization that I couldn't carry another baby and what that meant and how would we have our family. It was just too much to comprehend, and I didn't know how to go forward. We eventually started to talk about our options. Basically, it came down to adoption in our situation or surrogacy.
I had never even heard of, well, I had heard of surrogacy, but like it was never something I was like, yeah, that's something I'm capable of.
I knew the most about it because of Juliana and Bill's reality TV show. And I thought, wow, that sounds like a great idea. But I basically knew there was no way we could afford it. It just sounded so astronomically expensive, and we're fortunate people, but we're not extremely wealthy people by any means.
So I had written it off.
Yeah, and I basically
I'm kind of the money guy in this relationship. That's my wheelhouse. So I was like, let's see how we can make adoption work, I guess, if we're gonna really gun for the second one.
Yeah.
But then you did a ton of research.
Yeah, and then I started to really look into it because I really thought, okay, this is how we're going to raise our family and create our new family. And Travis's mom is adopted, and so it's very close to us in that way. But one thing kept just glaring out at me in the process, and they said it could take up to 2 years to have a baby matched with you. And then they said the mom could change her mind within 48 hours of the birth of the baby. And I just knew, after everything we had been through, we didn't have the capacity for another disappointment and another devastation. I wasn't strong enough at that point. And so really the only option became surrogacy. And so I started looking into blogs, and I basically was able to figure out the highest overview of how it worked. But basically, a lot of people used agencies, and agencies would let you find a surrogate. They would do all the medical screening. They would kind of facilitate your relationship for you.
The whole process.
The whole process. And of course, that sounds lovely and great.
And expensive.
But it was the most expensive part.
Yeah.
And so it became very clear to me that if we were going to do this, we were going to have to do it independently, which means we were going to have to find our own surrogate and do the whole process ourselves.
And we will explain how in part
4.
Yeah, we're not making this short at all.
Sorry.